The solidness of this matter.
Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, New Mexico, working on oil painting electric eel. Alright, today just continuing blocking in the shapes for the patterns covering the surface of the eel skin. Okay, there we go.
And as for whether this was so occurred, I mean, that's another mystery religion. Recently, it was a great mystery celebrated on the island of Summer, which had to do with materialization of very people, very beautiful, complex theology. The Indians went by the name of the great God, the mysterious group of luminous powers and feelings of the erected. Luminous powers who guided a religious ceremony in the island of Temple and elsewhere. Turned a mystery because things happened that must never be revealed outside. So, if Paul did make up the usual, and remember, Jews did not drink blood, where did he get the idea? He was very interested in religion. He would have been, if you're interested in religion, you go to this religion and that one, and experiment and so forth. We came from Tarsus, and Tarsus was one of the strongholds of Zoroastrian religion, Persian religion that was spreading into the Roman Empire. It was particularly popular with the Roman military. Only men who were initiated. Most of the soldiers, most of the emperors eventually of Rome and all the bureaucrats who administered the empire were initiated. Paul, of course, was poor. Although his family had enough money to educate him and fulfill Hellenism, he wasn't poor at all. They were munitions corporation. They were tent makers. And for the army, lots of money there. He was wealthy. And so he had close associations with the army. And it probably Paul was an initiative as well. Come back to eventually, but there was a psychoactive ritual. Another one. I'm pretty old. It's right here on the table. This piece of bread, but it actually full. Is pulling from Tarsus and the whole layer. What was in the frame? It was a chamber about as big as this, tent, underground, and men gathered there, no more than 30, and they went through a series of initiations, and they experienced liberation from the cosmos through the roof of this cabin, sometimes ornamented with what you can see on the other side as a guide to make it a pyramid. So this is one version of the rail. We went through various stages of initiation. State and I can drawn probably a disembodied eye, but what do you use to kill the bull? You don't kill a bull that way. What? You don't kill a bull that way. It's a pruning hook. What do you use a pruning hook for? For a plant. This particular mushroom. Of course, I made that up. Here is the Greek faith. Five of these places were two, so Perseus, who was interchangeable with that brother initiation of literature, he was wearing a cap, the fox hat, skylarks, Christian hat, wolf hat, turning into a wolf. taking, it's kind of like the head of the golden music, there, it looks like a murky, but it's different. It's really an apple, you know, came up with the head there. Now, that would be imaginary, if I just said, well, it looks like a mushroom to me. But there is a literary account that says that he didn't cut off the head of the golden moose, he picked a mushroom. So let's cut that out of the historical record, because we can't make it any sense of it. Here we see the banquet, and on the table we have in the middle Eucharist bread inside with the cross where the celebrated and the zodiac cross in the sky. So it has to do with making it so well. Very much like my friend Mark here, and our friend in Spain, and I wrote a book about this movie, and we spoke to the wealth of civilized Europe. We argued that the evidence indicates that there were a series of initiations involving various psychoactive agents, and amongst them, perhaps the final one, was the mushroom. But of course, it's impossible. Well, we found a Yazidi informant. We had him marginalized in Muslim society. And he tells us from his personal remembrance that his aunt was before the ceremony eating the mushroom. But he must be lying. So maybe he's not. Maybe lurking things that you don't think are mushrooms might actually be a mushroom. He's fully in shape of his family. Oh yeah, what about Rorschach? What about it? What about the everlasting as well? We have various evidence, but this is the most compelling, I think. The religion assimilated other cults too. So here's assimilated the Thracian cult of the great god Suboscus. It's very complicated. It's complicated because when we were undergoing the initiation, the meaning of the religion was out here. Also, I want to look on this one, and there is here some on one side, and here is religion, and here is nothing, and next to the is the one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a big. It's not a big, it's a clock. So, back to Paul. As someone educated in calendar, he was also knowledgeable about Neoplatonism, which he references in this very same letter. In his famous export of the true reality, he is seen only as a reflection of a faulty mirror through a black darkness, pushed through the Soviet barrier. He was blatantly referenced to Plato's elder of the cave. As a Jew, he would also be well aware of the conditions of the medical food that sustained the Israelites as they wandered 4 years in the desert. You ate it, and you saw God. It's only a metaphor. You ate it and you lived. No, you ate it and you saw God. You do something else to eat, like precaution, daily, food. But the Jews had nothing to do with psychoactive stuff. Hey, most of you know now that in Exodus we have the exact recipe for making the holy anointing oil for the priesthood. It also says, if anyone uses this, who is not a priest, talks about it in tribe. You can't use this profanely. And it includes, I cannot read that. It includes huge amounts of a substance which is translated as fragrant cane. Yeah, this is good. Okay. It's called Kind of Awesome. Hebrew only has the consonant, yes, consonant. And for over 100 years now, it's been recognized by the linguists that is cannabis. And if you use this and you're not a priest, it says you're exiled from the tribe. Does it work? I had a student who was the son of a rabbi. Cannabis is now legal in Massachusetts. He made up a batch of it, anointed his head with it, and he said, Professor, it works. Without any of the canonic scriptures yet in place, no something before, so charismatic humanity or not, many versions of the doctrine, which is what probably all know that this discovered found into another volume text of a letter from St. Clement of Alexandria. And he responded, can you hear me?
We're getting a microphone.
I have some visions. The Lord doesn't want me to hear me. Okay, let me continue. Actually, you hear me. He's responding to a young priest. Am I making sense?
Yes.
He's responding to a letter sent by a young priest who's heard that there is a Christian sect that is using a secret gospel that he claims the church in Alexandria has in its possession. And they're using it to justify having a strange kind of Christian agape, love, faith, peace, which involved sex. But it was a Gnostic sex. And so sex is fine because it's fun. And orgasm is the experience that many Christian mystics use in order to explain what it feels like to contact with deity. Sex is good. Incarnation is bad because that's good spirit and flesh. And so they were using it to have sex without procreation. And of course, the church dominant did not like that. And so, a remnant of this remains in the canonical gospel, At Gethsemane, when Christ was arrested, before
Actually,
he was arrested, the naked young man was there. Christ was initiating some secrets, and the naked young man ran away. Cornelius did this only because he was gay and he liked shooting them. It had nothing to do with it. And so Clement says, yes, we do have that letter. He left his composition to the church in Alexandria, where even yet it was most carefully guarded. And read only to those who are being initiated into the great mystery. Oh, the church has secrets that ordinary people don't know? Clement is the same. He said that. But let's look at what he says then. Nor if one can see that the secret gospel is unmarked, but to even deny it on oath. If anyone asks you about it, lie. Say it, we don't have it. Why? Well, it's not really what you think. It's because you're not worthy to have the experience. You might take the inference from God. You might abuse it. You might think it's fun. So, what was going on? From the 4th century, 300, there was an agape ball. It survived because the silicone was built upon it, and repairing the bell towers from the silicone. They uncovered the original floor of the agape ball. And it shows idea. Aquileia is just up the coast from Venice. Amongst other images, it shows a basket of snails. Oh, that's because the Romans loved mushrooms and they loved snails. This was not a restaurant. The famous fresco, Plank Road, that beginning of the past century was recognized by my colleagues as representing the tree in Eden, Adam and Eve, and the tree which now making the sky. But of course, in the Renaissance art, they painted, and medieval art, they painted trees like mushrooms, which is sky-like. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean something. If you trace who built the church and so forth, the heretical sect coming from the Holy Land and so forth, persecuted by the church against the Cathar sect, all of that to be a myth that he went into. It shows that he's involved with the old tradition of the fairy goddess, the golden Medusa, all of that. But it can't be beyond even the story. But everything belongs to its context. And Lawson, in his last book, reversed himself finally. He was reluctant to see what you see. I once said that there was no mushroom in the Bible. I was wrong. It plays a hidden role, and it's hidden from us until now. And a major one. It watches the best known episode in the Garden of Eden story, and what happened to Adam and Eve. But everything belongs in context. On the opposite wall, the same chapel, we have another fresco. It illustrates the myth of Saint Eligius. He's the saint of the elect, the special initiates, an alchemist. The myth is that God showed up with his horse, and he wanted his horse to have a blacksmith shot. He wanted the horse shot, horseshoe on him. And he just on the card.
best I could do with the audio on that. That was on a rainy day somewhere in Taos, sometime in Taos, Carl Ruck. Really good talk if you can get through the occasional tent opening to the sound of rain. But it is pretty good.
The patterns of activity in our brains.
How's our time?
There's energy flowing through our brains. And some of these patterns of energy...
8 minutes. Can I do another weird shape in 8 minutes? Let's see.
Become conscious.
Alright.
Our conscious minds are full of all sorts of forms, names and forms. We can form pictures in our dreams. We can see images of things that aren't actually in front of us. There's always a dynamical principle. We're moving in our dreams. So I think that when we ask the question, is the universe conscious? Then it's possible to say yes, it could be conscious, and what's more, its consciousness could tell us something about the ultimate source of all consciousness. Everything within the universe could be like fractal versions of this universal consciousness, with a unity of the given, of whatever system it is, the grounded being of that system, together with the forms and the energy that make it up. And we can see this as underlying our own mental activity. Now, of course, this leads to all sorts of detailed changes in our brains, which neuroscientists can study. But we're never going to understand the nature of consciousness just through studying brains, because then we get back to the hard problem. You can't just explain consciousness in terms of brain activity. You can find out ever more details about the activity. You can believe, as some materialists believe, that if we go on studying brains long enough, sooner or later the answer to consciousness will just appear. But I think on philosophical grounds that's simply not going to happen. And what we're in at the moment is this fascinating transition point between mechanistic materialism, which works very well for physics, it works very well for making machines, iPhones, televisions, jet aeroplanes and so forth, but it works very badly for explaining consciousness. And spiritual experiences, which many people access through a whole range of spiritual practices, and there's a revival of spiritual practices today. I discuss 7 in each of my 2 recent books, Science and Spiritual Practices and Ways to Go Beyond and Why They Work. These spiritual practices are ways in which we can actually get into a closer direct experience with these forms of consciousness beyond the human level. Meditation, although practiced by many people as a way of de-stressing after a busy day, or counteracting anxiety and depression, it's now practiced as a secular well-being type exercise. In the cultures from which it comes, contemplative Christianity, monks and nuns in monasteries, Hindu meditators, Buddhist meditators, Sufi meditators. The people who've done it traditionally in a religious context have done it not just so they're less stressed and they can cope with the stresses of modern life. They've done it because they think that by going to the very ground of consciousness itself, when you go past the ruminations, you cease to identify with the constant flow of thoughts that are going through your mind. You can reach states where you're in a state of awareness, just conscious of being. That conscious being puts us in touch with the ground of conscious being of all things. The Hindus like to use an analogy. They say, think of lots of buckets of water at night with the moon. And if you look in each bucket of water, you'll see a reflection of the moon. It looks as if there's hundreds of moons, but actually there's just one moon reflected in all these buckets. And there's one ultimate mind reflected in all conscious beings in the universe, in each one of us, in every conscious animal, in every conscious being of every kind, stars, galaxies, in the entire universe. So that meditation is a practice for getting to the ground of being. Other spiritual practices like music, dancing, and sports, which I think is the most common spiritual practice in the modern world that takes people into altered states of consciousness, especially being in the present. It works quicker and more effectively than meditation. You can't, when you're 50 feet up a rock face, start worrying and ruminating about whether you've paid the gas bill or not. If you're in the middle of a football game and someone's passing the ball, the crowds are cheering, you can't think about some remark your girlfriend made that pissed you off the day before. You're totally in the present. And sports are the principal way, I think, in the modern world in which people come completely into the present. Meditation is a slower process. But sports and moving spiritual practices like sacred dance, music, I think connect us to the dimension of spirit, the moving principle of ultimate reality. And I think aesthetic enjoyment, enjoying the beauty of flowers, of beautiful architecture, of art, is more connecting with the logos or beauty aspect of spiritual reality. So these spiritual practices connect us in different ways with different aspects of this ultimate consciousness.
Okay.
I personally think that this is a better way of experiencing it. It's how I
2 minutes to spare. All right, hold on. I'm going to clean my brush out and stare at this for a second, make sure there's not any more doodads I want to add to the
so I'm very familiar
things.
with that worldview. But if you want to stick to a materialist worldview and dismiss all these experiences as make-believe, then what you have to do is dismiss your own experience of consciousness, especially if you've had mystical experiences or senses of connection through spiritual practices, including psychedelics, which can provide spiritual openings. If you're going to dismiss your own experience in favour of a theory, the theory that it's nothing but the activity of the brain, that consciousness isn't really doing anything, you're putting a theory ahead of your own experience. But since consciousness is experience, and since we're meant to be empirical,
all right, and anybody interested in this background, that is Rupert Sheldrake's A Conscious Universe lecture, to be found on my Rupert Sheldrake playlist.
You have to make a personal choice, each one of us does. Whether to
Okay, so that gets some more symbolic looking shape,
pay more attention
creature
to that,
things
especially when it gives us a sense of forms
creeping
of
up
consciousness we
across
have
the
or keep
right
going
side.
back to the materialist theory,
And now from
about the
here,
brain.
we'll go back and start filling in each shape, solid shape especially, with one color at a time, until they're all just sort of a mosaic of little colored spots. And then I may work on either side of the negative space as far as the content of this trip, which was largely auditory. This eel sort of brought
to a more
whatever it was
rich view of
that
nature as alive,
decided to do the speaking that evening. So anyway, that's it for the moment. So thank you for watching this Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting electric eel. Have a good night, Earth.